On this episode of China Uncensored, I know how much you trust the label Made in China. Well, that same great quality is soon coming to the drugs you get at your local pharmacy, and you might not have a choice. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. China wants to sell drugs to Americans. I mean, sure, they're already selling drugs to Americans, but I'm talking about selling legit drugs, like vaccines. And not just to Americans, but to the entire world. It's part of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's plan called Made in China 2025. The goal is to make you have the opposite reaction to Made in China that you do right now. According to this report from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, China's goal for 2020 is to have at least 100 pharmaceutical enterprises obtain U.S., EU, Japanese, World Health Organization authentication and achieve product export. Plus, get 3 to 5 new biotech drugs, complete drug registration in Europe, the U.S., and other developed nations, and speed up the development of internationalization of domestically produced drugs. In other words, get the world to buy drugs made in China. And before 2020, their goal is to take over 90% of generic drug production. But there's a problem. That initial gut reaction you had to Made in China is still the right reaction to have. You see, drugs made in China have been known to have a few problems. Earlier this month, a Chinese pharmaceutical company recalled a heart drug it sold in the US because it may cause cancer. European regulators said the problem likely dates to changes in manufacturing processes at Zhejiang Huahai Pharmaceutical in 2012, suggesting that many patients could potentially have been exposed to cancer risk. I mean, heart disease or cancer? It's like the world's worst choose-your-own-adventure novel. The drug is called valsartan. It was one of those blockbuster drugs that went off patent, and a Chinese pharmaceutical company started producing a generic version. And this has been a bad month for Chinese drug makers, because now
police in China are probing Chinese biotech firm Changsheng Biotechnology for allegedly faking documents related to a rabies vaccine given to babies.
I know what you're thinking. Babies with rabies? Is that really a thing? Well, I think it was the inspiration for this statue in Norway. The rabies vaccine was part of a state-sponsored vaccine program, using vaccines specifically from Changsheng Biotechnology. Only one problem, though. Well, several problems. One is that Changsheng had given out more than 100,000 doses of a rabies vaccine for which it had falsified data. Another is it had to recall more than 250,000 other faulty DPT vaccines. And also, according to internal documents, Changsheng sold vaccines worth about $5 million to more than 10 countries like India, Cambodia, Nigeria, Egypt, Belarus, and some other European, African, Middle Eastern, and South American countries. Though there is no indication that any of the bad vaccines were shipped to those countries. So far, 15 people have been arrested in the scandal, including the chairwoman of Changsheng. The scandal was first exposed by an anonymous post on WeChat. It was quickly deleted by Chinese censors, of course, but it lives on through the Ethereum blockchain. The incident has sparked one of the country's largest public outcries in years, one that officials and censors have struggled to contain. But that doesn't mean they didn't try. According to Weiboscope, a censorship monitoring project at the University of Hong Kong, vaccine was one of the most restricted words on the Chinese version of Twitter. After all, as my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, said, if nothing is done to manage online public discourse, it could become a festering gateway leading the country towards chaos and creating serious unpredictability. Wow, a festering gateway? Sounds like the Chinese internet could use a vaccine. State-run People's Daily said the bad vaccines were safe, just ineffective. Oh, what a relief. Safe means the vaccines didn't directly cause harm. Not safe as in you thought you were immunized for a disease that you're still actually in danger of getting. Even so, people found out about it and were not happy. Things that hurt kids tend to generate a lot of outrage in China. In fact, the outrage has been so intense that Chinese leader Xi Jinping had to respond directly, which almost never happens. One Chinese woman called them all devils in hell, which is really rude, while others were kind of beaten down by the futility of it all.
If we can't even guarantee the basics of vaccine protection for our children, is there any difference between getting a vaccine or not? Getting one may even affect your kid's health. Why is this such a long-term problem? There have been similar health scares in 2003, 2006, and 2013. This has happened many times in China.
Just for clarity, 2003 was when the Chinese Communist Party tried to cover up the deadly outbreak of SARS. 2006, I'm pretty sure, refers to the beginning of what became the 2008 tainted milk scandal, when officials tried to cover up the tainted milk powder that killed 6 infants and sickened 300,000 others. And 2013 might refer to when 7 babies died after getting a bad hepatitis vaccine, although after an investigation, Chinese officials said the deaths were unrelated to the vaccines. She should have been a bit more specific. And really, she should have also mentioned the 2010 case of unrefrigerated vaccines that killed 4 children. Or the time in 2015 when hundreds of children were sickened by expired vaccines. Or the giant scandal in 2016 that involved 24 provinces, 29 pharmaceutical firms, 16 health departments, and more than 300 officials. In that incident, a woman was selling expired vaccines that she bought for cheap from a bunch of licensed and unlicensed agents, and then, with the help of local officials, sold them across China. Police discovered the stash of expired vaccines in an unrefrigerated, abandoned factory. And then the government took action by covering it up for a year. I mean, yes, this woman could have mentioned those other times, but there were so many, who can keep track? But remember, China wants to sell vaccines around the world as part of the Made in China 2025 plan. The problem is, now people in China don't even want to buy Chinese vaccines. And that's why Chinese state-run media wants you to know Chinese vaccines are definitely safe.
Are China's vaccines safe? Amid widespread public concern and questions from the media, the World Health Organization expressed its confidence in Chinese vaccines.
The Chinese National Regulatory Authority for Vaccine is known to regulate at international standards.
So I guess the World Health Organization is going to be on board with China selling vaccines around the world. That sounds great. So how do you feel about China's plan to sell you vaccines? Well, guess what? No one cares. Because of how the pharmaceutical industry works, you usually have no idea where your drugs are actually manufactured. You just pick up the prescription at the pharmacy. So if that bothers you, you might want to be concerned about China becoming a major player in the global pharmaceutical industry. And before you go, it's that time on the show when I answer a question from a fan who supports China Uncensored on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Spartaner251 asks, "Hey Chris, what's the situation on the Indian-Chinese border?" Great! The border is great. The border is very tranquil. As I'm sure you saw in last week's episode, the Chinese military has built a potential nuclear missile garrison in Sichuan province, not too far from the border between China and India. At least it's not far as the missile flies. And according to a U.S. official, but denied by the Indian government, China may be resuming activity in that disputed territory. In any event, you ought to stay tuned to China Uncensored to find out if anything big happens. Thanks for your question, Spartaner. And remember, if you want to have your question answered on air, you have to be a patron. China Uncensored is funded almost entirely by patrons who contribute $1 or more per episode on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Answering your questions is one of the ways I say thank you. So if you can, please consider supporting the show. Every bit helps. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. You know what's better than Chinese drugs? Half-hour episodes of China Uncensored. You can watch them on cable in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Check your local listings. You can also download our China Uncensored app on Apple TV, Roku, or Fire TV. Or just visit www.chinauncensored.tv.